Our headlines this Friday afternoon, August 18th, here in South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol has arrived in Washington, D.C. to attend the Trilateral Summit with the leaders of the U.S. and Japan. The three will gather on Friday at Camp David, where past leaders came up with many diplomatic breakthroughs. At Friday's meetup, the three leaders will adopt at least 2 documents emphasizing the Camp David principle and spirit. These documents will most likely try to open up a new era of cooperation in security and the economy. They will also hopefully formalize the summit as an annual event. For the first time in 6 years, the United Nations Security Council has convened an open meeting to discuss the human rights situation in North Korea. Washington requested the meeting. Pyongyang immediately opposed the request, receiving support from China and Russia. Good afternoon. President Yoon Suk-yeol has arrived in Washington, D.C. a day ahead of his Camp David summit with U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. On Friday local time, the three leaders will gather at the presidential resort of Camp David, where they are expected to produce at least 2 joint statements that strengthen and regularize their three-way cooperation, particularly on security and economic issues. The trilateral meeting will be the country's first standalone summit, as their previous three-way talks have only taken place on the sidelines of other international conferences. The leaders will also hold separate bilateral meetings while at Camp David. The host of the summit, U.S. President Joe Biden, has also set out for Camp David. Just like his predecessors, Biden is hoping to see major diplomatic breakthroughs at this historically renowned venue. Our Choi Soo-young tells us more.
On Thursday local time, the White House announced that U.S. President Joe Biden has moved to Camp David ahead of the Trilateral Summit with South Korea and Japan. Camp David is a retreat located in the Catoctin Mountains of Maryland, which is used by President and their family as a space for both holiday and work. The White House stated that this is the first time President Biden has invited foreign leaders there, demonstrating the importance placed on the relationship with South Korea and Japan. Reuters reported that a working lunch will be scheduled to take place at the Aspen Lodge, and it might be conducted outdoors with a no-tie dress code, along with walking in the forest. Patrick Ryder, spokesperson for the U.S. Department of Defense, mentioned on Thursday that this meeting holds significant implications for international security.
This historic meeting really proves how important this relationship is, not only to our country, but to international security. We continue to see more and more alignment between our three nations, between the U.S., Japan, and the Republic of Korea.
Michael McCall, the chair of the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee, also praised both leaders of South Korea and Japan for expanding cooperation in the economy and defense and resolving their differences through their shared values. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said that the summit would be an opportunity to strengthen the strategic partnership of the three countries.
We see this as a historic opportunity to strengthen the strategic partnership of the three countries, building on the ever stronger bilateral relationships with the US and South Korea.
Kishida also mentioned that the specific timing of the release of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant has not yet been decided, while the Japanese government will decide based on ensuring safety and mitigating damage. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
As this is the first standalone summit between the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, many have high hopes towards seeing a new chapter in diplomatic ties. South Korea's presidential office has confirmed that at least 2 documents will be adopted. What will these be about, though? Our Kim Do-yeon explains.
Just before leaving for the historical trilateral summit between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, South Korea's presidential office confirmed that the three leaders will adopt 2 documents to solidify the three-way cooperation. Plus, there could also be another joint statement.
As the outcomes of this summit, the leaders of 3 countries, South Korea, the United States, and Japan, will adopt 2 documents, the Camp David Principles, that will serve as a sustainable guideline for future trilateral cooperation, and the Spirit of Camp David, which encompasses the vision and implementation strategies of the trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the United States, and Japan.
Expected topics included in the statements are extended deterrence of North Korea, supporting Ukraine, tackling climate change, and protecting supply chains for the three countries. As a result, specific plans could be made for joint military exercises, more consultative groups on different topics such as cybersecurity, as well as something called an early warning system to protect supply chains. The presidential office, even before the summit, showed confidence about the results.
The Camp David summit meeting between South Korea, the United States, and Japan, which will be a focal point in pursuing freedom, peace, and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula and in the Indo-Pacific region, will divide the history of trilateral security and economic cooperation among the three nations into the period before and after August 18, 2023.
This comes as the White House earlier also confirmed that in the joint statements, the three countries will set their trilateral cooperation into motion with, quote, ambitious initiatives. White House Indo-Pacific Chief Kurt Campbell also said the documents will include making three-way talks between leaders an annual occasion, along with efforts to invest in a three-way crisis hotline between. In the meantime, China has already shown its discontent with South Korea, the U.S., and Japan strengthening ties. While it's likely there will be a mention of protecting the rule-based world order and possibly peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, a Yoon administration official has said the document is not likely to issue words confronting China. As for separate bilateral meetings, President Yoon will have a one-on-one sit-down with Biden and Kishida at Camp David. The summit, which will be on Friday, will wrap up with a joint press conference in the afternoon. Kim Dae-jung, Arirang News.
Another issue to be discussed during the summit is strengthening economic ties, mainly by establishing resilient supply chains for advanced tech industries, including chips. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young tells us more.
From an economic perspective, the global supply chain has emerged as one of the key agenda items for the trilateral summit between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. Regarding supply chain issues affecting high-tech industries, the three countries are expected to discuss specific ways to enhance cooperation, such as sharing related information and establishing so-called early warning systems. One expert says the summit could be an opportunity for South Korea to uncover alternative supply chains of rare earth metals.
Well, Korea is currently very dependent on China for rare earth, and there is some concern that perhaps China will use that as a tool against not only Korea but the United States. So I think the United States has to be more active in trying to provide alternate sources of these rare earths to Korea, so that Korea can become more independent from Chinese influence.
Measures for export controls against China are another potential key agenda item of the trilateral meeting. The U.S. prohibited the export of semiconductor production equipment to China, and Japan also joined in the chip restrictions against China. In the meantime, a one-year moratorium, which is set to expire in October, was applied to South Korean companies Samsung and SK Hynix, which are two South Korean chip makers with factories in China.
The U.S. will likely continue to push Japan to join China chip curbs. South Korea could probably receive a similar request as well. The three leaders could come up with cooperative measures on chips taking into account Seoul's chip manufacturing skills, Tokyo's manufacturing equipment and materials, and Washington's design capabilities.
Meanwhile, according to an official from Seoul's presidential office, an issue regarding U.S. investment restrictions on China will not be addressed during the trilateral talks. About a week ago, U.S. President Joe Biden signed an executive order that will prohibit some U.S. investments in China's quantum computing, advanced semiconductors, and AI sectors, and require firms investing in other tech sectors to notify the government when such deals are being done. Instead, issues such as the leaking of sensitive data related to advanced technology could be discussed during the talks. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
While Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo are trying to bolster security to promote peace in the Indo-Pacific region, Beijing is saying that the summit is the White House's way of drawing its Asian allies closer to counter China's presence. Our Lee Dong-kwan has this report.
As South Korea, the U.S., and Japan band closer together through the Trilateral Summit, where does China stand? Beijing has been opposing the summit, with Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin earlier this week saying that Beijing is against the country's patchwork of small circles that heightens confrontation. Chinese newspaper Global Times also claimed that the summit will trigger the new Cold War, adding that it harms the strategic security of other nations. However, Washington drew a line on this, with the State Department earlier on Tuesday saying that the summit should not be seen as provocative by China.
What this is about is deepening our partnership and collaboration on a number of areas that we believe are in the mutual shared interest of our three countries.
Now, the U.S. has been avoiding mentioning China when it comes to the Trilateral summit. Citing an anonymous official, AFP reported that China will not likely be directly mentioned in the joint statement, as Seoul refuses to show a firm stance towards Beijing. Although Beijing isn't best pleased about Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo's closer ties, China isn't showing clear actions on this matter. In fact, China rather started allowing group tours to South Korea last week. One expert says this may be due to China's current economic crisis.
This is somehow China's dilemma. Its economy is seeing a downturn, which means if it makes the wrong choice, that may have unwanted effects for Beijing. China's being cautious in its diplomacy right now.
He added that China may choose to strengthen its partnerships with North Korea and Russia following the summit. Meanwhile, there's interest over whether the three nations will discuss Taiwan or the war in Ukraine. Some experts say the result of this summit should expand on the Phnom Penh Declaration, where the three have reaffirmed the importance of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Citing an anonymous government official, the Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun on Thursday said that it's likely that a joint document will include the opposition to the use of force to change the status quo, referring to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China-Taiwan relations. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council held its first open meeting on North Korea's human rights issue in 6 years, only to see China and Russia backing the regime by calling the topic inappropriate. South Korea and the United States countered by saying that the North's human rights situation is deeply intertwined with security issues. Lee Seung-jae reports.
The UN Security Council on Thursday convened its first open meeting on human rights in North Korea in 6 years. China expressed opposition earlier in the week, saying that a council meeting on human rights in the DPRK falls outside the council's mandate, politicizes human rights issues, and only serves to intensify confrontation and antagonism. The Chinese mission's spokesperson added that Beijing sees no added value for the council to have such a meeting and will be against it. China's deputy ambassador to the United Nations on Thursday also criticized the meeting, saying that the main responsibility of the UN Security Council is to maintain international peace and security and not to discuss human rights issues of a specific country. He added that if the UNSC discusses human rights in North Korea, it will only lead to negative results, such as heightening tensions in the region. Russia also shared its opposition to the meeting, saying that raising human rights issues with North Korea is hypocrisy on the part of the United States and its allies, as North Koreans suffered because of international sanctions against the regime. Russia's ambassador to the UN also slammed South Korea, the US, and Japan for strengthening their military power in the East Asian region. In protest, North Korea took no part in the meeting. Pyongyang's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sang-kyung called the meeting despicable and said it has nothing to do with the universal conception of human rights protection. However, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, argued that human rights issues are in fact linked to security issues.
We cannot have peace without human rights, and the DPRK is a case in point. This war machine, which stands in violation of multiple Security Council resolutions, is powered by repression and cruelty.
South Korea's ambassador to the UN, Hwang Jung-guk, also stressed the importance of human rights in North Korea, adding that such issues will ultimately endanger international peace and security as the regime uses resources that should be spent on the welfare of the people to develop nuclear weapons. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The United States has said it will approve Denmark and the Netherlands sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. This will allow Ukraine to obtain F-16s to use in its war against Russia as soon as pilot training is completed. Reuters reported that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken wrote a letter to Denmark and the Netherlands expressing Washington's full support for both the transfer of F-16s and for the training of Ukrainian pilots. These two NATO members had recently asked for those assurances, as the U.S. must approve any transfer of F-16 jets. As announced during last month's NATO summit, a coalition of 11 countries will start training Ukrainian pilots to fly F-16 fighter jets starting this month in Denmark. Today marks the 14th year since the passing of former President Kim Dae-jung. A memorial service for him took place this morning at Seoul National Cemetery. National Assembly Speaker Kim Jin-pyo said the former liberal leader's politics was the kind that integrates, unites, and reconciles. Political leaders from both the ruling and main opposition party were at the memorial service. Ruling People Power Party leader Kim Gi-hyun said the former president set an example of a determination to transcend any bad past relationships for the national interest. Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung said he will remember the former leader's steely will that endured severe hardships. Kim Dae-jung was South Korea's 8th president. He received a Nobel Peace Prize for his work for democracy and human rights and his efforts towards reconciliation with North Korea. The National Assembly's Science, ICT, Broadcasting and Communications Committee has been holding a confirmation hearing from Friday morning on Lee Dong-kwan, the candidate for commissioner of the Korea Communications Commission. The rival parties are clashing over Lee's son's alleged history of school violence and Lee's past work under the Lee Myung-bak administration. Candidate Lee is a former journalist who has served as the senior presidential secretary for press affairs in the Lee Myung-bak administration and as the special advisor for external relations for President Yoon Suk-yeol. The initial deadline for the parliamentary confirmation hearing report is August 20th. Presidents can push through with appointments if the deadline isn't met, even after a potential extension of no more than 10 days. South Korea has finalized plans to extend its fuel tax cut for another 2 months amid rising crude oil prices. According to the Trade Ministry, following a final review on Friday, the fuel tax cuts, which stand at 25% for gasoline and 37% for diesel, will be extended until October. It emphasized that the measure has been put in place to reduce the financial burden on consumers and called on suppliers to refrain from raising prices beyond international oil prices. Economy and Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho had already announced plans to extend the cuts on Wednesday.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Israel, officials on Thursday said that the United States approved a request for the sale of a missile defense system to Germany. The agreement, valued at $3.5 billion, is Israel's largest ever weapons deal and would see Germany obtain the Arrow-3 missile defense system. The Arrow-3 system is built to intercept ballistic missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere. Tel Aviv needed Washington's approval as the defense system was developed jointly by Israeli and U.S. organizations and agencies. Israel says it expects a final contract with Germany will be signed by the end of the year, with the system fully deployed by 2030. Germany's purchase of the system comes amid a buildup of arms among European countries following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In Malaysia, 10 people were killed on Thursday after a small private jet crashed on a highway. All 8 people aboard the Beechcraft plane died, along with 2 motorists. The jet was traveling from Langkawi to Subang Airport on the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur and had received clearance to land. But it reportedly lost contact with air traffic control and veered off its flight path before crashing into a motorbike and a car on the highway. No emergency call was made. An investigation into the cause of the crash has been launched, and authorities are searching for the plane's black box. Now, the death toll from the devastating wildfires that hit the Hawaiian island of Maui last week continues to climb, with at least 111 confirmed dead, including children. The number is expected to rise, as many areas still need to be searched, with crews expected to comb through 2,000 destroyed homes and businesses. According to Hawaii's Governor, Josh Green, over 1,000 people are still believed to be missing. The cause of the disaster has not been confirmed, but CCTV footage shows a fire starting not long after a tree fell down on power lines. The company responsible for the power lines, Hawaiian Electric, is facing criticism for not shutting the lines down during high winds, which can create dangerous fire conditions. And finally, Britney Spears' husband, Sam Asghari, has filed for divorce after 14 months of marriage. The paperwork filed on Wednesday cited irreconcilable differences between the 41-year-old pop star and a 29-year-old fitness trainer husband. It also shows that they have been separated since late July. They first met in October 2016 on the set of her Slumber Party music video and got engaged in September 2021. Asghari is also believed to have played a key role in the ending of the controversial conservatorship, which saw her father take control of Spears' personal and financial affairs. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's a rainy Friday in southern provinces. Rain that started in Gyeongsang-do provinces has expanded further south, and most of Gyeongsang-do provinces could see up to 100 millimeters, and the rest of the south and Jeju Island could see 10 to 60 millimeters until Saturday. Meanwhile, sporadic showers are in the forecast for central regions during the day with thunder and lightning. Rain is not giving us much heat relief. A heat advisory remains in place across Korea, with highs climbing into the low 30s again this afternoon. So there's moisture in the air under sunshine in central areas. Highs in Seoul and Gwangju go up to 33 degrees Celsius this afternoon. The rest of the country is also seeing highs going slightly higher than Thursday. Meanwhile, those in the east of Gangwon-do province, however, will have comfortable temperatures. A chance of passing rain through next Monday, then there will be nationwide showers in the middle of next week, but that rain won't bring much heat relief to the country. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for you at this hour. Do stay with us for our panel session on what to expect during the first standalone summit between South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and his U.S. and Japanese counterparts. As for the Daily Report, we'll see you again at this hour next week.